Hello, one and all. Welcome to another episode of MMA Vision Analysis. This one, I'm here to talk about Alexander Volkanovski's recent comments in regards to his interest in being a replacement fighter for that potential Max Holloway Ilia Topuria fight, which does not have an exact date as of now, at least not that I'm aware of. But before I get started, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that notification to get all of this is new from this channel, your channel, the one and only MMA Vision Analysis. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The featherweight division in the UFC is probably the deepest division in terms of talent on that roster. And that ultimately means we have the best fighters on the planet fighting in that featherweight division. I stand behind these statements. I can just name a few names that will spark a fire behind these comments and really cement these comments as being true. We have obviously the featherweight division being championed by a guy named Ilia Topuria, which defeated a guy named Alexander Volkanovski. Also, we have a guy in the name of Max Holloway, which holds a belt that's called the BMF belt. We all know what that stands for. So the BMF himself fights in that featherweight division. We also have the new addition to that featherweight division, former bantamweight champion, which I have a lot of hopes and aspirations for, Aljamain Sterling, and so many other names in that featherweight division. It's a very interesting division in terms of talent. It is absolutely the deepest division in the UFC right now. I don't care what division you bring up. This one here has to be the deepest division in the UFC in terms of talent. Okay? We have the potential Max Holloway, Ilia Topuria fight, which does not have an official date, at least not one that I'm aware of. I believe this fight is going to be for the featherweight title, and also the BMF title will be included, because when Ilia Topuria spoke about this fight, he did express his interest in holding the BMF title as well, and having that title being included in the bout between the two. Number one, I do understand that this coming up statement is going to rub some people off the wrong way, but Ilia Topuria picks and chooses opponents. He was not ready to go in there defend his title against anyone. I don't blame Ilia, to be honest with you. He is the champion. I'm not sure how much he can really call his next shots, but I think there is a lot of logic in what Ilia is saying. He wants somebody that's kind of worth his time inside of that octagon. And who's a better name than Max Holloway, former featherweight champion? This will be a fascinating fight when it unfolds, if it unfolds. Obviously, here we have Alexander Volkanovski expressing his interest in being a replacement fighter for the two. Now, I want to stop at Alexander Volkanovski's comments and just kind of dissect them a little bit. I believe that Alexander Volkanovski in the past year and a half has been too tough for his own good. How do you say? First, he took the fight against Islam Makhachev. I'm talking about the first fight between the two. That fight was a very close fight, closely contested. As a matter of fact, I think Alexander Volkanovski was kind of robbed during the night of the first fight between the two. That's the night against Islam Makhachev. Obviously, Alexander Volkanovski. Then he went on to fight Islam Makhachev again, only this time it was a short notice. Allegedly, dude did not train for the fight, comes back, gets knocked out with that vicious leg kick, which potentially was the knockout of the year, right? Then he goes on and faces a guy in the name of Ilia Topuria. In all honesty, I knew little about Ilia before the Alexander Volkanovski fight, but I learned a lot about him afterwards. I really think the fact that Alexander Volkanovski was knocked out by Islam Makhachev the way that he did helped make Alexander Volkanovski look as bad as he did against Ilia Topuria. This is not to discredit the current featherweight champion here. Obviously, Ilia Topuria has some of the best boxing skills that I witnessed in that featherweight division. So, obviously, what I said just a bit ago is that I think Alexander Volkanovski is a bit too tough for his own good sometimes. And I'm not a huge fan of fighters taking fights on week's notice unless you are ready to save a major card from collapsing. I wouldn't have been really opposed to seeing Alexander Volkanovski being the replacement fighter for that Chandler-McGregor fight, only if Chandler was to pull out. I don't want to see Volkanovski versus Chandler. I think that would have been a very tough fight for him. And he did express his interest in fighting a Conor McGregor. I believe that Conor McGregor fight, in all honesty, with all respect to Conor, but Volka is just too much. Too much for Conor to handle. And I think, Volka, it deserves the nice payday. Now, he did express his interest in fighting Conor McGregor. And he did call it a quote-unquote super fight. Both of these guys have the names in the crowds to bring the eyes to the table if and when that fight happens. But here I'm talking about Alexander Volkanovski expressing his interest in being a replacement fighter for that Max Holloway Ilia Topuria fight. Like I said, many different ways of looking at this. I believe that Volka has to prepare himself strategically for an actual bout, like have a actual training camp. I don't think being casual about taking fights against the likes of Max Holloway and Ilia Topuria is just something that you want to take on week's notice. I do understand he's faced Max multiple times and defeated the guy multiple times in spectacular fashion. It means little, in all honesty, once you step a foot in the octagon again. I'm not sure how much Max is willing to fight Alexander Volkanovski. I do understand that Max will not back away nor shy away from fighting Alexander Volkanovski. But obviously, if Ilia was to pull out, there will be no featherweight title included in that fight. And I guess they will be fighting for the BMF title, which I really don't think that, that would be such far option from reality. I do think that this perhaps is something that could unfold. Obviously, if one of the two fighters was to pull out, I really think that Volkanovski is most certainly the replacement fighter for the two. I'm not sure how recovery went for Volka. It has been a while. He did get knocked out back-to-back. Vicious knockouts. Those kind of knockouts, I don't think people are really the same afterwards. I think when we see Volka back in that octagon again, despite his toughness, I think he's going to be a bit gun-shy. And it's just not... If you're expecting to see Volka prior to that Islam Makhachev knockout, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult. The dude suffered 2 vicious knockouts, and obviously the knockout versus Islam Makhachev was just such a devastating one. I mean, that shin when, it was just a vicious knockout. It almost cracked the skull, in all honesty. And I just don't think fighters are the same after this kind of punishment, especially back-to-back punishment. The Ilia Topuria knockout was also no joke. So I want to see Volka back in that octagon again. I hope that the Max Holloway Ilia Topuria fight goes on without any interruptions, and I would be a huge fan of seeing the winner of the fight between Max and Ilia fight Volkanovski, on an official date sometime 2025, so we can give Volka the opportunity to gather himself and have a proper training camp to face the likes of Topuria or Holloway, because these guys are no joke. I'm not a big fan of Volka entering that octagon on week's notice again against savages, the likes of Ilia and Max Holloway, which he's faced both fighters before. And that's what I mean, that I think sometimes Volka is a bit too tough for his own good. I hate to see Volka take a third loss in a row. I really hope that that's not going to be the case. I have a lot of belief in Volkanovski. Volkanovski's still mid-30s, so realistically, he still has a couple good years left in him. And even in the two fights that he actually did lose, obviously the second Makhachev fight, that was a bit unexpected. I mean, I don't think anybody really, except probably the camp of Makhachev, expected Makhachev to finish Volka with that vicious, high kick. You expect Islam to take you down and try to submit you. Unfortunately for Volka, that was not the case. Obviously, Ilia Topuria, fantastic boxing, and I just think that Volka kind of rushed into that fight with Topuria, and I just don't want to see that kind of thing happen again. I want Volka to have a proper training camp and face the winner of the fight between Max and Topuria sometime 2025 on a proper scheduled date with a proper training camp. If you made it this far, truly appreciate you for sticking around. Please let me know what you think in the comments and like, subscribe for more.